Okay, so today at Unsolved Truth, we have Robin right here. Robin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good to be on. As Michael said, this is Robin. Happy to be on the podcast. This is something new for me. Looking forward to it, and always good to have a chat. Haven't actually seen Michael in a long time, so it's great to catch up and chat.
Well, he's very camera friendly, as you can tell. He starts off by saying it's his first time he was on a podcast. Yeah, which is actually a lie since you've been on 2 days ago.
Yeah, I was on the podcast yesterday. I've done bits of camera work before. I used to actually be a professional musician, so I did recordings. I was in a cathedral choir, Canterbury Cathedral Choir. We used to record at night, and it was difficult because we had to wait for the planes to go overhead so that there was a clean, absolutely no background noise when we recorded. So we'd be in the cathedral from about 9 until 11 o'clock at night.
How old were you?
At that point in time, I was about 9 or 10.
Jesus, I would not trust my kid alone with priests at, at 11 o'clock.
No priests are involved, just the director of music.
Yeah, I still wouldn't trust anyone with my kid at 9 around 11 o'clock. So anyway, if that's the case, let's do a little choir at the end, and we can edit it in. What do you think?
Sure.
There we go. You can put that on your LinkedIn. So tell a little bit to the audience as well. What you do, what's special about you, what's unique.
So I have spent a lot of time traveling. I'm young, I'm 25, but I've seen quite a lot of the world. I've had the privilege of living in quite a few countries, especially in the Middle East. I've lived in Jordan, I've lived in Iran, I've lived in the UAE, specifically in Dubai. And I travel the world, specifically the Gulf as well, for work at the moment, particularly scaled back, of course, over the last 18 months. But I essentially work in the asset management industry and run events that connect investors with asset managers. So in a nutshell, that's what I do. I did not study finance at all. I just happened to get into this role. Mm-hmm. In fact, I studied humanities. I studied Arabic and Farsi. فممكن نتكلم بالعربي
طبعا نتكلم عربي.
لكل المشاهدين في الخليج.
طبعا we have a wide audience.
Very wide audience there, بالضبط.
So how did you find yourself in that role?
So I actually very serendipitously got an email from my university, if you like, university admin, who was heading up the Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies department. They targeted the firm I work with now. Were looking for people that had a interest or any form of connection to the Middle East, be that Arabic studies or having some kind of idea about the landscape, how to connect with people from the Middle East. And I just saw the job description and it ticked a lot of boxes. And to cut a long story short, I applied for the role, did a couple of interviews, and here we are today. And 3 years later, I am now directing investor relations for the Middle East for the company.
So let's ask this then for people who are listening. Why would they choose your enterprise or the company?
So it's more the other way around. So we it's more the fact that we would come to certain individuals. So it's quite small scale in the sense that it's the events that we run are exclusively for a specific type of audience. Exclusive, exactly. So we would have sophisticated investors from the Gulf attending, people from the various wealth funds out in the Gulf, and we would also have, because of the partnerships that we run in the Middle East, we would have VIP guests. I won't be able to disclose who they might be.
See what kind of a gentleman he is. He doesn't even name drop. What a gentleman.
But, as we say in the Gulf, wasta.
Oh. You almost made me spit.
Yeah, almost. Michael knows what I'm talking about.
Ain't that the truth?
Maybe Michael can elaborate on that word. It was it's a word in Arabic which essentially means connections. Yeah, exactly. It's who you know.
I think in the Middle East more than maybe still in Asia, in Japan, India, China, you'd see a lot of emphasis on connections. In the West, it's not as important as it used to be. Now it's more about what services you can offer. in back home, it's a lot about reputation, right? What have you done? Who you've worked with? And
Exactly.
I think results are almost secondary to how good your relationship is, which is very unique in that part of the world, I think. And it has, its advantages and it has its disadvantages, like everything else in life. So with the event management, can you name where it was hosted, what kind of speakers were on?
Yeah, so for example, we would typically run events about 5 or 6 a year in most of the Gulf countries. Biggest events would be in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, the capital city, and in Kuwait, because the investment community in Kuwait is large for various reasons, because of the oil reserves
course.
and etc. And they
It's
have
a great place for business.
exactly. They have about 3 or 4 very, very large funds out there, and everybody that wants some money that has any sense is knocking on Kuwait's door. So
Totally agree.
it's a very interesting part of the world to do business, and Kuwait is a particularly highlighted event for our clients who like to come out and meet with the investors there, because there is a lot of money, a lot of reserves from the oil. They have what they call a future generation fund, which is quite common in the Gulf. You don't tend to see it very much in other parts of the world, where there's a custodian for money generated by the reserves, so the oil money, the gas money, and effectively what these people from the sovereign wealth fund are doing are investing in long-term assets that deliver high returns, risk-adjusted returns. So they're very calculated in what they bet on, but they don't need a short-term time horizon. These guys are making investments for about, they don't need to cash in on investments for 10 years. They don't need to be 2 years and then liquidate the assets. They're going to hold for a very, very long time. But
What were we talking about, like 5, 10, 15?
possibly even longer.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd say typically about 5 to 10 years.
And where's the investment pools heading towards? Are we talking about company-wise investments, buying stocks? We're talking about assets?
Funds mainly.
Funds, okay. So ETFs and stuff.
Yeah, so more like actively managed funds by some of the larger players in finance. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the asset management space, there are large institutions that manage huge pools of wealth, and they take on external money and manage it and build portfolios themselves, and then they'll take a management fee, and that's how they make their money. So, for example, our clients, again, won't name any names, but they will go and travel to the Middle East to build long-term relationships with a view of soft networking to start off with, coffee conversations, exchanging of business cards, having a good introductory chat, because in the Middle East, the way to conduct business is not necessarily being very in-your-face aggressive. This is who we are. This is why you should invest with us, etc. You need to really pave the groundwork first.
Absolutely.
And it can take a couple of years for that relationship to yield some fruit, but with patience, comes potentially huge rewards. And you can't come in expecting to win lots and lots of money without having first established a long-term relationship. In-person meetings are hugely important. You cannot have, for example, a scenario whereby you can expect to win a huge amount of business having never met them face to face, because it's very important to have that analyzing of the team, analyzing of the body language, feeling that the presence is right. So there's a lot of you could say it's old fashioned, but it's the way that business is conducted. And COVID, of course, we can talk about how COVID has changed. Everyone has now been doing meetings online, so on Zoom or on 24 or whatever platforms are available. And that, of course, has changed the landscape slightly. But from my conversations, I'd say that people are far more comfortable having met somebody, or they would only really do business with people that they had pre-existing relationships with. So that's why it's very important, if you are a company looking to, or you are an individual looking to raise money or do business in the Gulf, that you travel and meet the teams, do your due diligence. Because if you don't do that, if you don't put in the groundwork, then they're not going to take you seriously.
So it's unbelievable because he's already answering my second question that was going to lead up on if you are a middle-sized company, you're looking for new investors, maybe sourcing from US or Europe is too difficult, or maybe it's not offering you enough funding, or maybe the bottom line is too big of an ask. How would a small to medium company, let's say generating 5 to 10 million a year, be able to come and acquire some of these VCs from overseas, from the Asian market? So would they first come to you, and you'd bring them into these sort of events, and how would that go on then?
So they wouldn't come to me, but there are certainly individuals who have roles almost like an intermediary or a middleman that can help to establish some of those relationships, perhaps take a cut for making introductions. But I think the most important thing is for somebody that's looking to conduct business in the Middle East or coming over to raise funds, now is the time. If you look at the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Gulf, so when I say that, I mean Dubai and Abu Dhabi are the two Emirates that most people are familiar with, Abu Dhabi being the capital, Dubai being the kind of tourist hub where everybody goes on holiday, and you have what we call short the DIFC, which is the Dubai International Financial Centre, which is where a lot of people choose to set up offices for various tax reasons, and also globally, it's right in the middle of everything. So you can have a call with Asia, you can have a call with the UK, time zones. You're right in the middle of everything.
Absolutely.
But going back to Expo, it's supposed to be much like the Olympics, which is now Tokyo 2020 running now. The World Expo was supposed to take place in Dubai last year, Expo 2020, which is
talking
now
about dating ourselves right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So whoever's listening in the future, well,
yeah, exactly.
now you know when it was filmed.
Exactly. So people are now going off to it's called the greatest show on earth, quite literally, because they've invested a huge amount of money into the infrastructure. They've built hubs where people can, exhibit stands. People are going to be flocking to that part of the world when it's safe to do so, and I believe it should be pretty soon, and it's very much going to happen, perhaps not immediately, but I'd imagine that over the next couple of months, potentially in 2022, the Expo will come to Dubai, and that is a huge opportunity for anybody that's looking to come out and raise some capital or get their brand name out there. Go have a look. Go have a look at the Expo. Find out as much as you can about it online. Go watch some videos on YouTube. The UAE, Dubai specifically, will be the place to be over the next couple of months, years, off the back of Expo. It's a great opportunity to get your name out there. Look to get an exhibition, for example. Also networking. You're going to meet people from all over the world coming to Dubai for the Expo, and you'd be silly. Yeah, exactly. You'd be silly not to take full advantage of everybody being in the same place at one time in Dubai. And going back to perhaps we talk about the DIC is a great place to work because it's very international. It's in the name, Dubai International Financial Centre. Dubai is a melting pot for cultures, and people from all over the world live and work in the United Arab Emirates.
See, I find that very interesting because you're very open to Dubai. So which one of the two do you prefer, UAE or Oman?
Oman is a lovely country, beautiful country. Muscat, the capital city, is lovely. It's full of beautiful traditions, history. Exactly, a very different way of life. We also run or have run events in Muscat as well in the past. Good place as well to go and visit. Business-wise, it is a bit more tricky to conduct business over there because things are a little bit slower. That, in a way, is
Middle East in general.
Exactly. That in a way is to do with the culture over there. So it is, rather than being like Dubai, where it's
it's a lot more laid back.
Yeah, it's a lot more laid back in general. So if you're looking to conduct business over there, you're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to put in the groundwork, do your trips,
Absolutely.
entertain. You know, there's a lot of red tape to cut through before you eventually have some kind of fruitful or yielding relationship. And also,
Absolutely.
Oman doesn't have the same resources or sovereign wealth, shall we say, as Kuwait or as Dubai or some other Gulf states like Qatar. But
So if I mean, again, if you're, it's always the same thing, right? Opportunity cost, limited of resources. You have X amount of capital, X amount of time. Which of these events would you recommend to for a small to medium-sized company that's generating between, let's say, 5 to 10 million? Would you say Muscat? Would you say Dubai? Would you say Saudi Arabia?
I think that if you start off with Dubai, and the
More
reason
Western friendly, of course.
more Western friendly. The reason why I say that is because you name it, they have a ministry for just about everything. They have a minister of happiness. They have there's a huge amount of work that goes into the governance of the United Arab Emirates and Dubai. So there will be somebody whose position it is to help SMEs, integrate into the region. Find out who that.
There's a lot of middle management.
Exactly.
There's
Find
a lot
out
of consultants. Absolutely.
Find out who that person is. Find out. Go on LinkedIn. Go on the government's website. Look at, for example, they have lots of hubs. They have acceleration centers. Dubai is very forward thinking. It's always future this, vision this. Everything is forward thinking. Even as far as 2071, there's a Mars, up to Mars. Let's get the first UAE astronaut up to Mars.
For some of the audience who's never been to Dubai, I would tell you Dubai is a lot like New York in a sense. It's very almost transitional.
Correct.
A lot of people are there and they're going to be there for 4 to 5 years, and then they're going to move on to a next place. It's just how Dubai is built, and I think it really suits Dubai for being very innovative. You don't want to have old blood, stagnant blood too long in any kind of machinery. You want it constantly moving, constantly innovating, and that's really Dubai as an essence. I think that for a lot of Westerners, like Robin said, it's a great place to start. I don't necessarily think you have to be able to speak Arabic, but I think it helps. Like anywhere else, be it Romania or be it Germany, wherever you speak the language, it obviously helps. I would say, who is Dubai for?
That's a very good question.
Say you're 18, 19, you're just finishing university.
I was almost about to interject and say that if you are young, it's a very good place for somebody who is in their 20s, early 30s. It's a very young place. So the youth are the future. They very much believe in paving the way for the future leaders of tomorrow. Today, for example, they'll take that as a slogan. They want talent to come, young talent specifically, to come to the region to generate ideas, knowledge share, make sure that local Emiratis, the youth there, are in touch with the rest of the world, how people are thinking from New York, how people are thinking from Hong Kong, how people are thinking from all over the place. Because a lot of what they're doing is to although bringing talent into Dubai, you could say it's transitory, but it will help pave the way for the future.
Absolutely.
Going back to this future thing, whereas a couple of decades ago, where Dubai was just a couple of towers in the desert, very small ones, albeit
20 years ago,
20 years ago there was nothing there. There was only one building on the Grand Sheikh Zayed Road, which is the main highway. And now they have the biggest this, the biggest that. Everything is there. It's developed, but the future is not so much in that. The future is not build. The future is looking green, harnessing solar power, harnessing
Very future forward thinking.
very
Absolutely.
future forward thinking.
Absolutely.
There is a city just outside of, just in between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, called Masdar, which is very futuristic. It already exists. It's there, and almost everything is run purely on natural resources. So solar power, wind.
It's very environmentally
It's very
conscious.
environmentally conscious.
Absolutely.
They grow. They have horizontal walls where vines are growing up, so they can build. They can make sure that, for example, I think it's called vertical farming. Don't perhaps I'm wrong on that, but I think the term is vertical farming, and they essentially, instead of having, because of course it's not very arable land, it's desert, it's quite harsh conditions, so using the scarcity of resources to create to the best of the ability is of absolute importance. So if you are in that space, you must come and pitch your ideas, or if you're an engineer, or if you have a specific set of, I'd say if you have a good skill set, if something sets you out from the crowd, let's say you are an engineer but with a specific focus in that kind of thing, so
In
renewables,
Sure.
that kind of thing, if you have trained in that space,
Absolutely. I mean,
golden opportunity.
absolutely. In almost any economy, there are certain careers and certain titles that are valued simply more because of where the economy is currently at, right? And I think for Dubai, engineers get paid very, very good money, more than the West, easily, sometimes even twice as much. Technologist, also very, very good. If you're a coder, fantastic. I think consultants still have some remnants there. I mean, it's obviously not as hot as it used to be. 5-10 years ago, if you were a consultant in Dubai, you're living your best life.
Exactly.
I think now most of the companies and government initiatives are more focused on internal structures, and so it's going to be difficult to get to be very successful there if you have a very standard skill set. I think if you're very specialized, then you're not going to have an issue. You're really going to make a good income.
100%, I'd agree. And it's tax-free for those of you that do not know.
Absolutely. Well, it's tax-free, true, but you still have to pay taxes if you're a U.S. citizen. Because
Correct.
your income doesn't matter.
Correct. Correct.
There's either one way or another. You're
There's a
always
price
gonna-
you pay for freedom, you know?
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
Absolutely. No, I think that from another viewpoint, while Dubai is the most Western country of the GCC, and I think that's very fair saying so, it is also the most expensive in living expenses wise.
I would agree.
It is very hard if you're going to Dubai thinking to yourself, well, I'm going to make all this income and I'm going to be saving all this money. It's sadly not going to be the case. When you double your income, you double your costs, typically.
Correct.
It's so, and Dubai has so much to do, whether it be sand surfing, scuba diving. You're constantly bombarded with activities that you can do,
Yes.
right? So
You name it. You name any activity, you can find it. You name it. You want
Absolutely.
to. You can sunbathe. You can skydive. You can scuba dive,
They have
and
the
you can also ski all in the same day.
absolutely, they also have the Arab version of the Louvre.
Correct. In
In
Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi.
It's a very, 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 very amazing building. For those of you who've never been to Abu Dhabi, the architecture is stunning. The Grand Mosque over there is absolutely stunning. Search it up. It's called, I believe it's the Sheikh Zayed Mosque, the Grand Mosque. And it has the most ornate marble and the chandeliers and the color schemes. Very simple, but very elegant.
Absolutely. If you're thinking of where do I want to go and I want to get out of Europe, I want to get out of the US, I would say Dubai is still very popular, and I think it offers you a great amount of activities that you can do. I don't know if it's the most price friendliest place on the planet. Well, definitely not on the planet, but it's definitely one of the richest activities that you can do in a geographical location.
Correct. Having said that, because the market was flooded, if you want 5-star, if you want 7-star, you've got so many places that you can go to. If you're looking for more mid-range, so let's say 4-star hotels, 3-star hotels, something that would be the equivalent of, for example, for those of us in the UK, like a Holiday Inn or a Premier Inn or something
Absolutely.
like that. there's not a huge deal of inventory or hotels out there, but people realize that, and there have been more and more of these sort of mid-range hotels being built because the market was so saturated with high-end this, high-end that.
And the market was also saturated with so much capital as well.
Exactly.
In the early days, there was an enormous boom. I think even today, you can argue that Dubai has an oversaturation of FDI investment.
Yeah.
For all your travelers, by the way, out there, good tip: whenever hotel you're looking for, contact the hotel personally. Either call them or email them, because they can offer you often better prices than what you can find on Booking.com or anything else. Takes a little bit more effort, but you can often save a bit more money.
100%. There is always a deal in Dubai.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially if you can get anyone if you can look up on LinkedIn or anything, get their personal email or phone number and email them directly. That's probably your best bet.
If you're a shopper, they have the fashion sales. They have specific enterprises or specific months of the year which are dedicated purely to high sales, up to 70% off.
Yeah.
There's a shop.
Yeah.
There's a shop that I always pass, and it always makes me laugh. And it says, closing down, everything must go, 90%.
I see
and it's
that in London all the
always,
time, mate.
always there. And
I see that
think-
all the time
I
in
think
London.
I'm going to go back and it's going to be the same thing. I'm like, you guys have been closing down for 5 years now, you know?
There's that saying, right? It takes a long time for a bad business to die.
Yeah. but in all seriousness, again, going back to the, yes, you're spending, but you can find great deals.
Let's plan a career path, right? You came out, let's say marketing. Let's say you've done your degree in finance. You're 19, 20. You're looking for jobs and opportunities. Are you saying, hey, you know what? Dubai is really good, but it's better if you're a little bit more experienced. It's better if you already have a little bit of dirt on your hands.
Exactly.
Right? And so you're saying, try to get a good job in London, New York, wherever, in a big city, at a big firm, and then slowly try to get independent and move out? Or would you say stay in that big firm and try to get yourself to Dubai?
100% agree with all of what Michael was saying there. It is a fantastic place to live and work, but usually you would have to have something to offer, prior experience, a decade to, at least several years, build a reputation, bring something to the table. So you'd find typically that most of the more junior positions are filled by young locals. So,
Sure, absolutely.
For example, let's take investment companies. People have been sent to, although there are good universities locally, a lot of big brand names are in Dubai. In the UAE, for example, you'll have some famous universities, for example, that have another branch, but based in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. Same with the schools, for example, Wellington. There's a Wellington school in the UAE. They have American universities out there in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, but when you look at some of the more junior people, for example, at the investment companies that I deal with,
It is a country policy to try to hire more local.
Exactly.
And that's completely fair, and it makes total sense from an economic perspective. I think if the only reason, I think if you're young is if you have very specialized skills, then you might, like a programmer, like maybe an investment banker, maybe a lawyer, if you're very specialized in copyright law or whatever. I think there you can still find yourself an opportunity. Other than that, it's probably best to go further in Asia, maybe Hong Kong, maybe Japan, maybe Vietnam, or somewhere, or even South Korea. That's probably your best bet of starting to build your skills. And I think concentrating on the Asian market is probably best for you if you're starting off your career than going to the Middle East. Middle East is, I think, saturated at the moment with young talent, but they need very specialized young talent.
Yeah.
And quite simply, I don't think a lot of people have that because it's specialized.
Correct. And you also have the all the big names you can think of: consultants, banks, insurance
The Big Four,
companies, the Big
absolutely.
Four. They're all operating out of Dubai. So I would say that most people that end up working in Dubai have done the grad schemes in London or New York. They've done a couple of years. They've rised up the ranks, and there's been an opportunity that's presented themselves to go and further develop their careers by working in a different market. So I think a lot of the people that end up in Dubai end up there because they're part of perhaps the same firm but joining a different global division.
Sure, absolutely.
Somebody said, go out there, have a talk to so and so, who's the boss out there. I think you could be a good fit for their new team. So I think
A word of mouth is absolutely
word of mouth, exactly.
Now, this is where I was going with the next.
I can give you a very good anecdote. So
course.
my dad lived and worked in Dubai for a very long time, and he retired for a year or so, decided he didn't want to be retired full time, and then went back to work. How he got his job was very serendipitous. He happened to be walking about in the financial center, and he bumped into an old friend. And he happened to mention he was back in Dubai and wanting to move back there again to do a couple more years because he wasn't quite ready to fully retire. And it just so happened that even though people were saying, actually we like you, but there's no positions at the moment, he happened to speak to somebody who he'd worked with in the past, who said, "Do you know what, Mark? We're not really looking for a role, but I think you might be a really good fit for this particular company. Give me a couple bullet points. Give me 24 hours. Let me speak to the powers that be, and you can come in and speak to the big boss tomorrow." He didn't have any planning, no intention on interviewing for this company. It just, all the dots fitted together, and the rest is history. He ended up working there for 7 years.
Don't worry, it's fine. We can edit that out.
So, who serendipity, word of mouth, very important. Reputation is absolutely everything.
I totally agree with you. I think what needs to be said is again, I'm always thinking about that young person, that person's coming out of university, and they're bombarded with all these different techniques on networking, services, blah 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 blah. How will you say you're 18 again? How are you going to build that network?
I would say start as soon as you can, even in your early teens.
Sure.
If you are out with friends, or you went to a school that has a network, go to the events that are run, subscribe to the mailing lists, make sure you're an active person, and really take advantage of everything that's presented to you. For example, like university, you can even from your university, join the societies. If you're an old boy of a school, for example, use that network. Every relation, you never know where you're going to end up, who's going to end up helping you in life. You keep your friends close, and make sure that you are thinking about how in the future, you never know what happens. You might want to have a conversation with this friend or this person, and they'll know somebody who you really want to connect with, and that's your way in. And just really, I think, being creative and not being too shy, really, even it might be an awkward conversation, but you say, "Oh, hi, Michael, you wouldn't perhaps know this guy by any chance?" Actually, yeah, he knows my cousin. I can.
Absolutely, the world is smaller than you think.
It really is. I can set you up. I can set up a meeting or help you get to the right person at this particular company. So again, back to that wasta. Let's go back to the connections. It's important.
I would add something to Robin. Sorry to interrupt you. I think that the key thing in networking, of course, going to the venues, going to the meetings, being open, being sociable. That's all fine. But I think the key item is to be interesting. And the
Agreed.
best way of being interesting is exploring, be it hiking, be it reading, whatever activity that brings you joy. There's going to be someone else in that room who either is interested in it or has done it.
Agreed.
And that's what you should be really focusing on. If you like hiking, try to go every weekend whenever you're free. If you like reading, try reading as much as you can. If you like painting, paint, whatever.
Exactly.
But the worst thing possible is just sitting down and just watching Netflix or whatever, that's not going to get you anywhere. Maybe unless you're somehow a producer or you want to be a film critic or whatever, then I could say, yeah, watch more Netflix. But other than that very specific field, I don't think it's going to do.
Yeah,
a
you
lot
only
for
get what you give, right? You know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But
And I think-
I would say, yeah, definitely being interesting helps a lot. You know, I love going to conferences and events and networking things, and especially in London, you know, there are a lot of people from the Middle East in London. It's a place for a lot of people from the Gulf come here over the summer. They have second homes over here. You know, there's a lot of particularly people from Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Dubai. They're all here, and of course they speak very, very good English. But I studied Arabic and Farsi. If I meet somebody that, you know, is speaking a bit of Arabic and I say hello, how are you doing? You know, nice day, isn't it? For example, something very, very simple like that. Immediately, their eyes light up and they look at me as if I'm sort of an alien or something and say, "How?
Of course, of course,
Ish."
of course.
So it's for my interesting thing is that I can connect because I speak the language, I understand the culture. I kind of, you know, I know they'll say, for example, "Oh, I just flew in last night." I could say, "Oh, did you fly the Emirates route from Dubai? You know, were you on one of the new planes?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah." So it's
Absolutely.
you find something in common, you use it, and you never know where that's going to take you in life. I've made some of my best friends when I lived abroad in the Middle East just by sitting in a cafe, and someone said, "Can I borrow this chair?" And I said in Arabic, "Tafadhal, tafadhal, yeah." And they looked at me and said, "So you speak some Arabic? That's impressive. You know, you're here studying, etc. Let me show you around." People are very friendly.
Absolutely, absolutely. As soon as you can connect, you're always gonna get
Breaking
further.
down those cultural barriers.
Absolutely,
You know?
absolutely. Especially, I mean, some of the most friendliest people you're gonna find are in the Middle East,
Agreed.
hands down. You know, and I think probably the best way or best direct way of connecting with the Middle Eastern, especially in the GCSE, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in Oman, in Dubai, UAE, is probably to go camping because they love that stuff.
Yes, they do.
And if you have always had a dream of saying, "Hey, you know what? I've always wanted to take a motorcycle and go up and down in the UK or America or wherever," that is going to land you more than any diploma, than anything else. It really builds character. And that's what people really hire you for. And that's why people want to take you on board, is because you're unique, because you have that character.
I think for anybody that's sort of thinking to themselves, how can I stand out from the crowd? How
Absolutely.
can I do that? I think a lot of people go into interview situations thinking that there is a right answer and the interviewer would love to hear this. So, for example, let's say you are interviewing for a specific role and you've really done your homework on the firm and you say, "You know, I think I'd be a great fit because of X, Y, and Z." That
ain't gonna
everybody's going to say that.
anywhere.
If
Absolutely.
you go to your interview and say, "Do you know," and like I did, and said, "Oh, I have a very musical background, and I really understand.
Absolutely.
I really understand the link between languages and music, and I think they're very intrinsically linked. I am good," and you can tie in, for example, if you've sung in a choir, you can say,
Absolutely.
"I've got teamwork. You know, I know how to work as part of a team. I'm a team player." Things like that. But you using anecdotes from your past, you know, really trying to think of everything that might not seem immediately like it could be a good thing to bring up, but actually,
Absolutely.
you know what it really is.
Absolutely. I think for a lot of people who think they can only get what's in their reach, I think people should really aim to exceed your grasp, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's really down to one thing. When we come back to it again and again, it's about being authentic, being whatever makes you you, and then taking that up to 11. And it doesn't matter what it is. And that's really going to get you to places.
Exactly.
Pretending someone that you're not just in order to fit a mold
100%.
is not going to get you anywhere other than maybe entry level.
100%.
That's it.
And people can see through the bullshit.
Absolutely.
Really.
People want genuine people. Right? So I would...
If you don't understand, for example, if I don't understand something, I have no problem saying, I'm sorry, would you mind, elaborating on that a little bit? I'm not going to pretend to
All good bosses love to teach.
Engage in that conversation and not have any clue what I'm talking about. It's the wrong approach. You want to take a step back and say, I didn't quite catch that. Do you mean this? Do you mean that? I think communication is very important.
Absolutely.
Especially in the Gulf, it's very important. People, as we were saying before, Dubai is very fast paced. If you don't understand, for example, a task that's given, if you're told to do something and you don't understand the task, don't sort of smile and nod and then leave the meeting and then scratch your head thinking, actually, what was it that I need to do? Make sure you understand what the task was, because there's no shame
not
exactly.
knowing. And I think you guys have to remember is that a good boss loves to teach, and if your boss doesn't love to teach, then that's probably the wrong either department or job for you, because that company's not heading anywhere.
Yeah,
that's at least in my experience.
Yeah.
Now, okay, let's look at it from a different angle. How is it different, the Middle East, to a guy who's just coming out or girl from London?
I'd say, let's take, for example, Dubai. We're using Dubai a lot here, but Dubai and London.
People always have scares of cultures. They're worried about what can or can't they do. Is there any truth to that?
I think that I'm a very firm believer in you need to see it to believe it. People have perceptions of what it's going to be like.
Like in Russia, absolutely.
Exactly. Go to the country, go on holiday, go speak to some people. It's not what it seems, You never know. You never know. For example, I can give you a very good anecdote. I took my girlfriend, who had never been to the Middle East before, to Dubai in December of last year.
You should have messaged, mate. You should have messaged. We could have gone out for coffee.
Yeah. Bahrain's just an hour away.
Mate, I don't know what's going on with you.
Yeah, but COVID times and everything. But we did a very short trip, and she had never been to the Middle East before. Had all these ideas of what it might be like. Are women allowed to do this? Can I wear shorts, etc.? And all those barriers are broken immediately. In the first 24, 48 hours when you're there. And you see it's very, very friendly, very similar environment to it would be, for example, in the UK. You can wear a crop top if you want to wear a crop top.
Absolutely.
You can show some flesh if you want to do that.
Absolutely.
You just don't take it to the extreme. Don't go out and get heavily inebriated and then go do something stupid.
I think you can do that in private resorts if that's
exactly. If that's really what you want to do. But
then doing it like if you're a typical guy who's going to a pub to start trouble, that ain't gonna work for you.
No.
And I think most of the world, that's not gonna work for you.
Exactly. Just be sensible. It's the golden rule. Just be sensible.
I mean, that's what they say, right? The problem with common sense, it's not common. And yeah, and I think that people don't take that into account.
Yeah.
Anything else that I think we need to speak on for?
I think that
Dubai in general.
I think that
or young
if you've never been to the Middle East before.
Well, what about the other way around? Let's think about it from a different way. Sorry to interrupt you. I think this is more interesting for maybe the older audience. You're maybe in your 50s or maybe in your 60s. You're well experienced. Maybe your opportunities are running out in the West. What's your best option? Is it the Middle East or is it Asia? Where do you think is someone like your dad, for example?
I think you want to. Of course, it's not a light decision to make to uproot and go somewhere else, try something new. But if you feel like you've plateaued, if you feel like you're not progressing anywhere, then I'm a firm believer in trying something new. Don't be afraid to try something new. I think that I caveat that with only do it if it makes sense. Don't suddenly decide, right, I'm going to go and live and work in Moscow because I met somebody from Moscow that said it's the place to be.
Yeah.
You've got to do some research. Go there, get a feel for it. Think, is it for me? How can I see myself there? Is it, if you have a family, is it going to be a good place for me to have my kids and my wife? Is it a good location for them as well as for me. But I think, and I had been an expatriate several times in my life. I think that it's a great experience. It opens you up and makes you a more interesting individual.
Sure. But that's if you're younger. I'm talking about a person who's maybe in their 50s and the 60s. Maybe they have another, let's say, 5 to 10 years of good business knowledge. They're well experienced. How would they go about in getting any kind of entry into that market? What would you recommend?
I think again, if you're of that category or bracket, I think you want to play to your connections and your network.
Okay.
Do you know people in that country? Do you have friends that have knowledge and connections,
whatever?
If you are, for example, if you have a lot of industry experience, that can be a very good thing. We were talking earlier about how it's a very great place to be if you're up and coming, etc. But
Absolutely.
It's also a great place if you are at the top of your fields. They're always looking for, specifically the Gulf, specifically Dubai, specifically countries that are really fast paced in the Gulf. They're looking for experts in their fields.
Absolutely.
Keynote speakers.
Absolutely.
Keynote speakers are constantly brought to conferences, etc., and are paid an enormous sum of money. Even like $200,000 for giving a half-hour keynote.
Absolutely.
People pay big money to hear the insights. I think that ultimately it is a good move if you feel that the dots line up. I don't think it would be a very spontaneous decision. I think you'd want to think about it quite carefully. But as you were saying earlier, it's transitory, right? It's not an end. It's not. You're not going to be there for forever. It's transitory. It's a great place to be for a couple of years.
I agree.
Go for it.
I think it comes back to the same that we've been saying, and I think we're going a little bit in circles here. Connections are important. The way of making connections is to go to these events, to build up your persona, sign up to whatever industry it is. I would recommend maybe writing ebooks, doing a blog, doing a podcast, doing whatever would make you a specialist in your industry. Being an author is a very quick and easy way of doing it. And through that, you can then build your reputation, try to be public speakers, go to these events. And that's really going to turn your life around more than really anything else.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Okay, so we spoke about elder people trying to get it in for the elder bracket. We spoke about how younger kids or teenagers trying to build up their social network. What about events? So let's say you're a company, you have 100 employees, maybe even less of that. Let's say you have 10 employees. What would be the best way of building these events?
Building the events. Now that's an interesting one. Again, Dubai has an awful lot going on. There are so many things to do, so many events to go visit.
Let me clarify my question to you. So let's say your company, maybe you're about 5 to 8 years open. Let's say you're middle, you're established, right? You got your place in the industry. The question now comes down to, how do you build that reputation? How do you become a leader in that industry?
I think brand is very important. Mm-hmm. People in the Middle East especially love reputation, brands that have good reputation. Mm-hmm. So if you are a big name, that for example, if you are, let's take for example, again going for events within finance. If you are, for example, Mercer or Cambridge, like a very big, reputable advisor, they love hearing from people with that brand name attached to them. Mm-hmm. It's a particular draw.
Okay.
But so that's the other end of the stick. So your question is more along how to build.
Of course.
How to build. So get yourself out there as much as possible.
I would clarify on Robin, and I would say use the tools available to you. See who you have currently in the industry, who you know, and then build programs.
Yeah.
Right? That even if it's just like an open bar once a month, whatever, because that's what's going to allow you to build that network. And for the first, I would say 2-3 months, you're probably going to be about breaking even or making a loss. Right? And then afterwards, after you got about 50 to 100, then you can do like event tickets where you can start selling events, right? You can be like, we're doing like a Friday, Saturday, a brunch and alcohol or whatever. That's what's gonna, or maybe like a golf tournament or maybe
Exactly.
a tennis tournament or anything like that. That's really gonna get you more.
And Dubai is a small place. People will start talking, word of mouth. It spreads very quickly.
Absolutely. Building that email list is really, really key. It's really, really key. Having a blog is also key. And being interesting. We always come back to it. Spreading information that's useful to your customers. Even if it's highlighting a competitor, which is fine.
Yeah. I think going to be a lot of hard work and graft, but
absolutely,
you're working. You're going to be working 6-7 days a week, putting in the hours, but it's a city that doesn't sleep, right? It's constantly moving, constantly shifting. Things come to life, particularly at night.
Absolutely.
So you might not have a typical schedule where you're working from 9 to 5. You might particularly want to put an emphasis on the evening. You might want to run events that start, for example, late at night, because in the summer it's bloody hot.
Whether it be go-kart racing or paintball shooting, there's a lot of mechanisms on how to grow your brand and you as an individual, and to make those connections. And yeah, that's probably the best way of what's going to really bring up your brand, bring up your station in that industry, and really segment yourself as a leader of that industry. And then later on, host events, speakings, go to Robin's firm, become a speaker at with them. That's what's going to push you up the scale.
Yeah. Well, I think perhaps, is there a specific topic that we should end on, do you think? Or
I mean, no, we don't have Twitter running. Otherwise, we'd have questions at the moment. I have a few questions that people have asked me to ask you. Because I told them that you work around event management and asset management. One of the questions I kept getting asked is, for who is asset management for? From a perspective of a young guy or maybe a middle-aged guy in their 30s who wants to change career paths.
I would say both, but you would probably be very unlikely that you would stumble into, if you were searching for a career in asset management. It's very broad, right? You could be either someone who's highly analytical, in which case
it depends on the firm.
Yeah, it depends on the firm. So
absolutely.
you could have there are a huge amount of roles. So personally, I'm not analytical at all. So if I was to break into an asset management firm specifically, I would imagine a role that would be best suited for me would be much more client-facing, distribution, fundraising side, so quite a salesy role, versus somebody that's highly analytical who would be, analyzing investments and be a, for example, CFA charter holder. That would be, you'd be much more working with analyzing data, numbers, but there are a very broad range of roles available within the industry. So you could be either an analyst or somebody who's in sales. And for me, for my personal sort of skill set, I would say I'm more suited to the latter. But if you're highly analytical, then you're going to want to be, part of the former. So there are a huge amount of roles available. You could work in marketing, for example. There are a lot of people in asset management who have marketing roles, marketing degrees, MBAs that work on the marketing side. So within these larger organizations, there are so many roles available.
So let me put it this way then. Over the last couple of years, what has changed in asset management when you got in to now? What's different behavior? Are there different technologies at the moment? Are there different approaches? What's going on in the industry from that perspective?
I would say that there might be a slight sort of black mark around fees.
Okay.
So quite high fees are taken by asset management firms for what we call in the industry actively managing something.
Absolutely.
And these days, there's many more funds and investment solutions available to people that aren't actively managed.
There's also so much TikTok conventions.
Exactly.
You know, buy in for this 5K speed. Come to this event for 10K. There's a lot of that going on. You think it's a better position to be in where the entry fee is as low as possible or free, I assume.
So I think in life you get what you pay for.
There's absolute truth to that.
And if you are looking, for example, let's take the last 18 months, which have been particularly volatile. Personally, I would have wanted to be invested and paid a small amount extra for somebody that's there, you know, actively managing
Absolutely.
the geopolitical risk,
Absolutely.
the external factors, you know, somebody that's really hands-on, has a proven track record. Yes, I would happily also invest in a passive fund, but if something like COVID happens, or if something unexpected happens, then the active manager would be able to find a workaround quickly and, you know, make some tactical bets to hedge that risk versus the passive. So yes, you pay some money for being for having, you know, a hands-on management approach, but, you know, that's not a bad thing, especially if there's something like COVID that comes along or something like the financial crisis comes along. And
that must have really upset that whole industry, to be honest.
Oh yes, yeah. I'm I'm very young, so I wasn't around when the GFC hit. But
I thought you were going to say when the Spanish flu hit.
Yeah, no, but there are events that come around that do change.
Really disruptive.
Really disruptive, exactly.
So how does that change the industry then?
So I would say that you need to have going back to this network and pre-existing relationships. Before COVID, if you had made the effort to go and travel and meet with people, if you're looking to fundraise, if you are an asset manager, those meetings that you took, those trips that you bought your portfolio manager from the US or from Hong Kong or wherever was so important, because if you had not have done that, doing it all virtually would be, you could do it. Yes, you could do it, but they've not yet met you. They've not yet looked you in the eye, face to face, in person. You know,
so there's going to be obviously a little barriers of trust, I imagine, especially if you're a newcomer on a weird Zoom call, you know, where you're not getting any kind of neural feedback on who this person is. You know, you're just seeing a screen on a two-dimensional picture of this person.
Yeah, but I think I stumbled across my line of work, as I said, serendipitously from an email. It was the first job I applied for, and I did the interviews, and it went well, and I now am where I am. But it's very you know, it's sometimes things change very quickly. You might get an opportunity, and for example, a lot of people that I know that work within the industry, they don't have economics degrees. They don't have educations that would reflect, you know, the kind of roles that they have. It's very, very much, you know, I have, as I said, a humanities background, but I ended up in the industry. You don't have to study economics to go work at Goldman Sachs. You don't have to have been a finance major to go and work for a hedge fund.
True, but
mean,
you have to be an accountant to work as an accountant. though.
Yes, exactly.
Otherwise, that's illegal.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that you'd be surprised how many people end up in the industry.
Of course.
Without having any desire at first to get in there. So it's.
I mean, in one way or another, we all end up in finance, whether it's personal or
Exactly.
corporate, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
there's no running away from that.
Exactly.
I mean, the way I see with COVID, there was a lot of pop-up companies that came about offering kind of these get-together meetings in VR spaces. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like with Oculus Rift
Yes.
and
Yeah.
Microsoft has their weird HoloLens.
Yeah.
But that's not really VR, that's more AR.
Yeah.
So do you see that industry growing, happening?
I think so. Yeah, I think technology has improved significantly. We are able to have virtual everything
Here, I'll help
conducted
him open the
virtually.
door. Mate.
No, thanks a lot.
No worries. Sorry, who's listening? We just had to help a guy get out through the balcony. So what we were saying about
Technology's in
involvement.
place. So, for example, if you work in conferencing like we do, you could host, instead of being in person, you could simulate a live event, but virtually, where you have exhibition stands and you can have, e-digital cards. So you have somebody, you can exchange business cards in an electronic fashion. There are companies that were put together to simulate, and this was even before the pandemic. This was a technology that existed, but of course the pandemic accelerated
that. Absolutely.
that. But of course, my personal opinion is you can't replace the human interaction. Exactly.
Absolutely, I agree. I think these events are always going to be popular, and I think in the future they're probably going to grow in even a more popularity. It's more important than ever to build these connections, and that's the same thing we keep on talking about and trying to really get the audience to understand. I think all this VR stuff and AR has a place in the industry for maybe people who couldn't show up to the event. Maybe it's a good way of having a better interaction with a speaker, right? Like if they're giving a host or a TED Talk or whatever. There's a definite market for that. But the real connections happens outside the speaking, right? Where you compare notes, you meet people at the bar, you talk about them. That's, where magic happens. All right, well, I think that's about it.
It's been a pleasure to be on the show, Michael.
It's been a pleasure having you on. And hopefully, if you're free the next couple of weeks, we'll come back down and we'll get through Twitter, maybe some questions people are asking. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for being on.